There's a law written into the bones of history: no empire survives its own currency. Rome fell when its silver was mixed with copper. Spain collapsed under mountains of useless gold. Britain surrendered the pound to debt. And America built its empire on paper, an empire of belief, not backing. For nearly a century, the US dollar ruled the world like a hidden monarch. It became the oil's lifeblood, the global reserve, the benchmark of every nation's worth. Wars were fought, alliances forged, and economies shaped, all in the name of the green note. The dollar was not just money, it was faith. Faith in a system, faith in a nation, faith that promises would never break. But faith is fragile, and faith, when stretched across continents and generations, begins to crack. In 1971, President Nixon made the most fateful move of modern finance. He severed the tie between the dollar and gold. In that moment, money became an idea. The physical world weight scarcity discipline was replaced by numbers on screens and confidence in men. For 50 years, the illusion worked. America printed wealth without limits, markets soared, debt became culture, and consumption replaced production. Every empire before had relied on gold, but the dollar relied on belief. And belief is the most dangerous currency of all. Now that belief is fading, BRICS nations build trade routes outside the dollar. China and Russia buy gold by the ton. Even Western allies question the cost of holding a currency that inflates faster than it inspires trust. Gold, silent, inert, eternal, begins to move again. Not as a relic, but as revenge. Its price rises not because of greed, but because of memory. Memory of every empire that thought it was different. Memory of every king who believed his coins could defy time. Because gold remembers what money forgets. That value is not declared, it is proven. And in the end, every paper throne burns the same way. And now, it's happening again. Every empire begins with productivity and ends with illusion. At first, money is a mirror of effort, a token of real creation. But as empires expand, power separates from production. The rulers print wealth faster than the workers can earn it, and the currency, once born from labor, becomes a symbol of control. The dollar's supremacy followed that same law. After World War II, America emerged as the lender, builder, and banker of the planet. Under Bretton Woods, the dollar was as good as gold, 1 ounce fixed at $35. Factories roared, trade surged, and the American dream became the world's export. But behind that dream, a clock began to tick. By the 1960s, spending outpaced output. Wars and Vietnam, social programs at home, and the growing appetite for global dominance pushed the U.S. to print more dollars than gold could back. Europe and Asia demanded repayment in metal, not paper. The vaults in Fort Knox began to empty. And in 1971, Nixon faced a choice: lose the gold or lose the empire. He chose illusion. From that moment, the dollar was no longer tied to truth, only to trust. And trust can be managed until it can't. The petrodollar system built through deals with Saudi Arabia kept demand high. But every new dollar printed weakened the foundation. Like Rome debasing its coins, or Spain flooding markets with bullion, America flooded the world with credit. Debt became the new gold, infinite, manipulable, addictive. Governments borrowed. Corporations expanded. Consumers learned to live beyond means believing the bill would never arrive. And as the real economy slowed, the financial one exploded. Value detached from reality. Wealth became perception. This is not new. Every empire that replaces production with speculation enters its terminal phase. Rome built villas while borders burned. Britain built railways while its colonies revolted. And the United States built derivatives while its middle class disappeared. Gold has no loyalty. It simply waits. It waited through centuries of human arrogance, through the rise and ruin of kings and currencies. Now, as the dollar's purchasing power erodes and its dominance is questioned, gold begins to move again, not as wealth, but as a warning. Because history does not forgive deception. It repeats until the lesson is learned. And that lesson is simple. No empire can print its way to eternity. History proves it again and again. Every empire begins the same way, with honesty. At its birth, money is a reflection of work, discipline, and scarcity. It carries weight because it's backed by something tangible: metal sweat trust, earned through struggle. In Rome's early republic, each denarius held true silver. The coin was a contract, a silent promise between citizen and state. In Britain's golden age, the pound sterling was literally sterling, pure, hard, and rare. And in post-war America, the dollar became the world's pillar because it was as good as gold. These currencies didn't conquer by deception. They conquered through credibility. Gold and silver restrained human ambition, forcing governments to live within their means. When a king or senate wanted war, it had to pay for it in metal, not imagination. That restraint created stability, and stability created faith. But success breeds temptation. Once an empire realizes that people trust its coin more than the metal behind it, the door opens. Why mine gold when you can print paper? Why earn when you can declare? The Romans discovered this temptation first. To pay legions and build monuments, emperors began to shave silver from their coins a little less each year. Citizens noticed, merchants complained, but the empire was already addicted. Scarcity created order, abundance created decay, and in that shift from value earned to value imagined, the downfall begins. Picture this, a marketplace glowing in sunlight, coins clinking confidence high, yet every coin slightly lighter than the one before. That's how civilizations rot, not in battle, but in mint. But the pattern had already begun. The next phase is always the same. Illusion becomes industry. As empires grow, their appetite outpaces reality. They discover the power of paper promises that circulate faster than gold, reach farther than armies. Spain was first to experience this on a global scale. In the 1500s, galleons poured gold and silver from the New World into Seville. For a time, Spain was the richest kingdom on earth, yet within a century it was bankrupt. Why? Because too much wealth kills productivity. Spanish craftsmen stopped building. The state imported everything and inflated its own prices out of existence. Britain learned a similar lesson centuries later. In the 1800s, its pound was the world's backbone. But imperial expansion demanded constant loans, railways in India, wars in Africa, colonies to maintain. The empire's balance sheets grew heavier than its vaults. By 1931, when Britain left the gold standard, the pound's glory left with it. And then came the United States, the empire of abstraction. After 1944, the dollar replaced gold as the foundation of global trade. For every ounce in Fort Knox, there were 20 promises abroad. When Nixon ended convertibility in 1971, the world entered a new religion, fiat faith in paper. It was genius, and it was fatal. For decades, America's illusion became the planet's operating system. Dollars flowed through every market, every nation, every deal. Oil was priced in it, debt was denominated in it. It was an invisible empire maintained not by armies, but by spreadsheets. But illusions are expensive to maintain. To sustain infinite consumption, you need infinite credit. So the U.S. Government borrowed, corporations leveraged, and citizens learned that debt wasn't a danger, it was a lifestyle. The economy no longer created value, it created velocity. Wall Street became a cathedral of belief. Traders worshipped graphs instead of gold. Every crisis was met with more liquidity, every warning silenced with another injection of printed comfort. The empire of paper replaced truth with confidence and called it progress. Picture this, skyscrapers glittering at dusk markets, rising everyone wealthier on paper, while beneath the foundation hollowed like ancient marble. By the 1990s, America was untouchable, but the very strength of its illusion made it fragile. When money has no anchor, every tremor becomes a storm. The Asian crisis, the dot-com bubble, the 2008 collapse, each was a rehearsal. Each time the solution was the same: print, rescue, repeat. Rome debased coins, Spain debased trade, Britain debased debt, America debased belief. And when belief breaks, nothing holds. By the time they realized, it was too late. There's always a reckoning. When an empire forgets what money means, gold comes to remind it. Gold is not wealth, it's memory. It remembers the promises men broke and the trust nations squandered. It cannot be printed, persuaded, or punished. It simply waits. In 1923, Germany's paper mark collapsed under its own weight. Children played with banknotes, housewives burned them for heat. But gold, the same ounce of metal, could buy a home. In 1979, when America's inflation raged and faith in the dollar cracked, gold soared 2,000%. Every panic, every loss of confidence is gold's quiet revenge. And now the pattern repeats on a planetary scale. The dollar, once unchallenged, faces rivals with real assets. China and Russia accumulate gold by the ton. BRICS nations create trade networks outside Washington's reach. Even Western central banks, the supposed guardians of fiat, quietly rebuild their reserves. Because they know when faith falters, metal matters. The empire of paper is cracking under invisible pressure. U.S. debt surpasses $35 trillion. Inflation eats wages. The world questions whether risk-free assets are still safe. Each printed dollar buys less. Each promise sounds weaker. Meanwhile, in vaults beneath Zurich, Moscow, and Beijing, the counterweight gleams in silence. Gold doesn't rise and price currencies fall against it. That's why it seems immortal, not because it grows, but because everything else decays. Empires fall for many reasons. Corruption, arrogance, war, but always through the same mechanism: overreach. They mistake credit for creation numbers, for nourishment paper, for power. And when the illusion fades, they rediscover the same truth that built their ancestors' empires: real value weighs something. The reckoning is not sudden, it's a slow unwinding. Markets rise on denial, then crash on recognition. History turns the page, but the ink is always gold. Picture this vault, doors closing, lights dimming, the hum of servers fading, and in the dark, the dull glow of metal reflecting the end of an era. Gold's revenge isn't violent. It's inevitable. Not a war, but a mirror. Every empire that forgets weight is destined to feel it again. Because gold remembers what money forgets. You can print promises, but not truth. And the empire of paper is running out of both. History doesn't repeat, it evolves. And the next stage has started. History never ends. It only changes its disguise. And today the disguise is green. For 80 years, the US dollar has been more than a currency. It has been the bloodstream of the global system. Every trade, every loan, every reserve has pulsed to its rhythm. The empire of paper extended beyond borders, binding continents not through conquest, but through contract. But now the rhythm stutters. In 2025, the signs are everywhere visible to those who dare to look. Inflation cools on paper, yet the cost of living rises in silence. Markets celebrate stability, but debt charts curve like cliffs. Each soft landing the Federal Reserve promises comes at a heavier cost, not in jobs or growth, but in trust. The illusion of control is fraying. Since 2008, the U.S. has printed more money than in its previous 2 centuries combined. Stimulus became a reflex, debt became policies, and liquidity became religion. It worked for a while, but the price of infinite rescue is invisible inflation, the slow corrosion of faith. Confidence, not gold, is what anchors the dollar, and confidence, like light, fades fastest when it burns too bright for too long. Across the world, the dollar's grip loosens. Saudi Arabia, the keystone of the petrodollar system since the 1970s, signs oil deals in yuan. Russia sells energy in rubles and gold. India experiments with rupee settlements. Even France, one of Washington's oldest allies, buys liquefied natural gas in Chinese currency. A global rebellion unfolds, not with weapons, but with spreadsheets. Each nation hedges quietly, reducing exposure to the dollar, diversifying reserves, buying gold in tons. This is not ideology, it's instinct. They've seen the pattern before. They remember the British pound once as good as gold fading into history, and now they sense the same weight shifting again. Inside America, the cracks are cultural as much as financial. A generation raised to believe in limitless credit now faces the mathematics of exhaustion. National debt surpasses $35 trillion, a number so large it has lost meaning. Interest payments exceed defense spending, consuming the budget like a slow implosion. The dollar still looks powerful, but it feels tired, a veteran currency fighting wars of memory and denial. Picture this: skyscrapers lit by artificial optimism, markets flickering, green commentators chanting resilience, while beneath it, all the real economy gasps for air. Factories quiet, infrastructure decays, wages stagnate. And in the silence between financial news cycles, a deeper question emerges. If money no longer represents work, what does it represent? The shift is no longer theoretical. It's happening in real time. Every month, central banks quietly add gold to their reserves. China, Russia, India, Turkey, Brazil, even Poland and Singapore, the list grows. Since 2018, the world's official gold reserves have increased by more than 6,000 tons. Each ounce is a vote of no confidence in the dollar. In Beijing, policymakers call it strategic diversification. In Moscow, it's de-dollarization. In Washington, it's a geopolitical challenge. But in truth, it's something older, simpler, and unstoppable: the return to gravity. Gold is not the enemy of the dollar, it's its shadow. The brighter the illusion, the darker the shadow grows. And now the shadow stretches across continents. In the East, BRICS nations test digital settlement systems backed by gold and commodities, the first credible alternative to SWIFT in half a century. Their vision is not chaos, but independence trade, without permission value, without politics. The West calls it fragmentation. History calls it evolution. At the same time, new technologies change the nature of money itself. Central bank digital currencies. CBDCs promise speed and control, but they also reveal fragility. When money becomes pure data, the question of truth returns what gives this code meaning. When everything is digital, authenticity requires weight, and that weight, once again, is metal. The more the world moves toward virtual wealth, the more it craves physical anchors. That's why gold's rise is not speculation, it's remembrance. It's the world remembering what it forgot: that value is not declared, it's demonstrated. Meanwhile, investors and institutions begin to act on instinct. Sovereign wealth funds accumulate bullion. Hedge funds quietly shift allocations. Even Western banks that once dismissed gold as barbaric now call it strategic. In 2025, the gold price hits new highs, not because of greed, but because of fear disguised as prudence. The empire of paper is being rebalanced ounce by ounce. The transition is slow, almost invisible, like continents drifting beneath the ocean. But once in motion, it cannot be reversed. Picture this: deep beneath cities, vault lights hum. Bars of gold, stamped, numbered, motionless, rest like the bones of civilization. Each one represents not wealth, but memory. A memory of discipline, of scarcity of truth. And as currencies float and falter, those silent bars become the gravity wells of the next era. The West speaks of inflation control and interest rate cycles. The East speaks of real assets of tangible power. Both sides understand what few dare to say aloud: the next monetary system is already being born quietly in the vaults of those who still believe in weight. When the last illusion breaks, gold will not rise, the dollar will fall to meet it. And that fall will not be a crash, but a correction, the natural end of a century-long experiment in belief. The world of 2025 looks eerily familiar to the historian's eye. It resembles 1971 when Nixon severed gold. It echoes 1931 when Britain abandoned it. It whispers of 1914 when nations suspended convertibility for war. Each of those moments marked not the end of money, but the end of illusion. Each time the same cycle: overconfidence, expansion, exhaustion, and return. The same cycle is unfolding now, not as catastrophe, but as correction. Because history's lesson is not destruction, but equilibrium. The gold accumulation of BRICS is the new Bretton Woods, unspoken and unofficial. The weakening of the petrodollar is the new Suez moment, a sign that the empire's center of gravity has shifted. And the digitization of money is the final irony. In a world of infinite data scarcity, it becomes divine again. Gold is not a rebellion. It is a reconciliation, a reminder that the laws of physics still govern finance, that you cannot create value faster than you create trust, that even in the cloud, gravity wins. Picture this: satellites orbiting a glowing Earth, data streams wrapping continents, currencies flashing across screens, yet deep underground, the real system hums. In silence, heavy, finite, immutable. History doesn't repeat, it rebalances. And the rebalancing has begun. The empire of paper is not dying, it is transforming. But transformation always has a cost. For every empire that tried to defy scarcity, the price was the same: humility. We are witnessing not a collapse, but a reckoning. And when it ends, money will mean something again. In the end, every empire believes its currency is different. Rome thought its silver eternal. Britain trusted its pound to last forever. And America believes the dollar can defy gravity. But gravity is never lost. It waits patient, silent, inevitable. It is the weight behind every lie, the reckoning behind every illusion. Gold has no ideology, no loyalty, no mercy. It doesn't punish or forgive. It simply reveals. When trust dies, gold surfaces not as treasure, but as truth. For a century, the world traded belief for convenience. We called it globalization, liquidity, progress. But what we built was a tower of promises, and at its foundation, the oldest metal on Earth still glows in the dark, waiting to reclaim its throne. History whispers the same warning: empires never fall from outside, they collapse from within. The dollar's empire will not die in flames, but in silence, as the world quietly stops believing. One day, the last printed bill will mean nothing. The numbers will fade, the screens will go dark, and the only thing left with weight will be what always had it. Gold will not rise, everything else will fall. And in that fall, the next empire will be born. Slower, colder, more aware of its own fragility. Because history doesn't repeat itself. It evolves, and the next cycle has already begun.